What has Biden done to improve the lives of all Americans? Did Biden pass criminal justice reform? No. Did he pass police reform? No. That would have been President Trump on both those issues. And by the way, after Baltimore, after Ferguson, what did Barack and Joe do? Nothing. Who changed it? President Trump changed it. Did Barack and Joe create opportunity zones in struggling neighborhoods? No, that would be President Trump. President Trump has been in office, as I said, less than 4 years, and during that time, pre-coronavirus, record after record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment, and African American youth unemployment. That's great for our collective American family. Recently, the president took important steps to restore order in American cities, including those tough measures against vandals, those who have been attempting to tear down any and every statue across the country. By the way, where does Joe stand on these issues? I know Terry McAuliffe wants him hiding in the basement. I'm fine with him there. He only sees 2 people a day. And when he stepped out for 5 seconds last Thursday, what did he do? He talked about 120 million Americans that died from COVID. Where does Biden stand? Where do you see our montage later tonight? Does he want the statues of these generals and Lincoln and Jefferson and Washington torn down? Where does Joe stand on this? Does Joe support Princeton University stripping the name Woodrow Wilson from its international affairs school because of President Wilson's, quote, racist thinking? What does Joe think? What about Planned Parenthood? We, you, the taxpayers, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars funding Planned Parenthood. You know, Margaret Sanger, the clinic, well, should that be renamed as well? Because Sanger founded Planned Parenthood in the early 20th century. Sanger was a well-known racist and eugenicist. Guess what? Arguing in favor of population control among poor people, also those with mental and physical handicaps and others who struggled in society. She once wrote, quote, "We do not want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the bleep African-American population." Sanger once took her message of population control and presented it, guess where? At a Ku Klux Klan rally. Joe Biden, where do you stand on Planned Parenthood and its founder, Margaret Sanger? Where do you stand on the American taxpayer funding such an organization? And by the way, buildings named after her, do we want to go there too? Where does Joe stand there? American taxpayers gave around $600 million you give annually to Planned Parenthood. Why would taxpayers give a dime to any such organization? What about the Russell Senate building named after a prominent Democrat, also a known segregationist? In their decades in the Capitol, why haven't Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer, the 125 years, why haven't they done any of these things? And by the way, then there's the former Klansman that was the head of the Democratic Party for the United States Senate for all those years, Robert KKK Byrd. Biden praised and eulogized his former colleague. Biden said that he held him in incredible esteem. Pelosi called Byrd, quote, a great American patriot. Schumer heaped also praise on Senator Byrd. Without a doubt, this represents the complicated, seedy, hypocritical history of what is the Democratic Party that they would like America to forget. For example, Biden once worked side by side with segregationists, including the former Klansman. During a speech in 1973, Joe Biden praised Southern Democrats and said that the two-party system in the South was, quote, good for beep. And around the same time, Biden was actively working with desegregationists to slow integration by opposing school busing. According to NBC News, quote, he led the charge on an issue that kept black students away from the classrooms of white students. 1977, Biden worried his children would grow up in, his words, a racial jungle if integration is not done in an orderly way. 1993 referred to inner-city young people as predators on our streets. And as he co-authored an aggressive crime bill that ramped up prison sentences for dozens of crimes, that's where a lot of disparate sentencing came into play, and that's what Donald Trump fixed. Predators on our streets? Yeah, really, Joe? Of course, Biden's rhetoric, well, that didn't stop in the 90s, 2006. He's the one that said you have to have a slight Indian accent if you want to work at a 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts. He also bragged that his state, Delaware, was a slave state. He also said about Barack Obama, this is the first mainstream African-American who's actually articulate, bright, and clean. He said it's storybook, man. His words. 2019, he bragged about his work with segregationists to get things done in the U.S. Senate. Last year, he said, quote, poor kids could be just as bright as white kids. Okay, Joe. Weeks ago, Biden told the radio host, Charlemagne the God, quote, you ain't black unless you're supporting him over Donald Trump. It's pretty obvious why Biden spends, all of that time in his basement bunker, because every time he pops his head out, he can barely string two sentences together. He's constantly making weird statements, many of them racial in nature, and it's only getting worse as Biden ages. Now, many are wondering, Joe Biden, is he really fit to serve as the commander-in-chief? I asked this question in 1984 about Ronald Reagan, but does Joe Biden have the mental alertness? Does he have the stamina? Does he have the strength to take on what is the hardest job in the world? And by the way, what's going to happen when he finally has to leave his basement bunker for good? And when will the media, after 88 days without a press conference, start demanding that he do so? A Rasmussen poll just out shows 38% of all voters think that Biden has some form of dementia, and that includes 20% of Democratic voters. Will the mob and the media, will they ask Biden the same questions they asked Reagan about age and mental acuity? And don't hold your breath, because guess what? In fact, don't expect Biden to leave the basement. They're not even asking him to.